William Lowe and I are back for another roadmap, and tonight we're going to talk about how to stay motivated. This is an important subject and one we haven't done a specific segment on it, but we sure do hit on it all the time because in other talks because it's real important and something that we all need to do to advance our recoveries. So because if you're not motivated, you don't do your work. And if you don't do your work, you're likely not getting better. So, William, I know you had some thoughts on this that you were going to start us off with. So, why don't you go ahead and do that?
Yeah, sure thing. So I think motivation is pretty important when it comes to recovery after stroke because as a lot of the folks who are watching this would know, stroke recovery, it takes a lot of perseverance, it takes a lot of patience, and it takes a lot of persistence. And at the end of the day, stroke recovery, it's not a sprint, but rather it's a marathon because, remember, recovery after stroke, you're essentially writing your life script after you've had your brain injury or after you've had your stroke and how you want to live the rest of your life since you've had your stroke. And what that means is that if you want to live the best quality of your life, then it's crucial to stay motivated in achieving that goal and really have that as your North Star, as something to be constantly aiming for. And as we all know, as stroke survivors, it can get really hard to stay motivated, especially when you're not seeing improvements or changes. And it can actually get discouraging. And you might believe that, maybe it isn't possible, or maybe this is as good as it's going to get, as a lot of physical therapists might have told you when you had attended therapy through insurance. But what Ralph and I want to talk about today is ways we we stayed motivated in our journeys. I believe Ralph, I'm not sure how many years it is since your stroke. I believe it's more than 10. Myself, I'm about 11 years since my stroke, and I'm still very motivated in my journey. Um, and and Ralph and I figured that by exchanging our notes with the folks watching, that you guys would be able to maybe get some ideas on how you could stay motivated in your journey and maybe find some ways to, I guess, achieve your best recovery possible, or move towards your best recovery possible since you've had your stroke. So, so I guess I'll just start off by sharing one of the things I found most useful in my recovery, and it's the idea of even if you don't feel like doing exercises or working on your recovery, to do it anyway. And the reason why I say this is really important is because there are going to be times in your recovery after stroke where, it's going to get very boring. Let's say you're a stroke survivor and maybe you're attending therapy through insurance, and your physical therapist has you doing the exact same exercise for 10 weeks on end, with no improvements. Or maybe you've been doing the same exercise for maybe 2 weeks and then you're not seeing any improvements at all. Well, in these scenarios, it might be really difficult to keep persisting because maybe you're expecting, a instant like an instant turnaround, such that you can wake up one morning and you can see that you're able to actually perform something as well as before your stroke. But in most cases, more often than not, that actually doesn't happen. And recovery actually accumulates over time, in that you're only able to actually see the final result after months of actually doing the exact same thing, unfortunately. So, speaking for myself, in my own recovery after stroke, I found that during times when maybe I wasn't as motivated to do the exercise, even when I actually just started doing the exercise anyway, I kind of persuaded my brain to persist through and finish off the exercise at the same time. And this was a really helpful way to obviously allow myself to stay motivated in my own journey, particularly when it came to things like relearning how to walk, That was a tough one. So I think that's a really important thing to consider in your recovery after stroke, and it actually works psychologically because psychologically your brain is inclined to want to finish things which are left undone. So how this might manifest in your recovery after stroke is that if you don't feel like using your affected hand to maybe wipe down the benches, you could wipe down the benches with your non-affected hand, maybe 80% of the bench with your non-affected hand, and then you could do the last corner or the last 20% with your affected hand. And because you've done it that way, it's going to be a lot easier to be motivated to do that, given that you've already done most of the task with your non-affected hand anyway. And there are other examples such as when you're going outside and you're leaving your house, the door handle is right in front of you. Even if you don't feel like it, you could use your affected hand to open the door to to go outside because the opportunity is right in front of you. And that, in a sense, is exercise for your brain because you're actually applying some of the things which you might have gotten back since you had your stroke by obviously forcing yourself to use your affected hand to obviously turn the door so that you can actually go outside. So so that's that's one really powerful I guess technique I used in my own recovery to stay motivated. And another one, and I'm just trying to think here if there's anything else to cover before I pass back to you, Ralph. Um, Earlier, Ralph, you and I we were having a discussion about this. I don't think it was earlier, but it was a while back, and you also mentioned that you had something similar that you did to stay motivated as well. Before I bef, before I keep sharing other things I have about motivation, would you like to talk more about that and maybe exchange your ideas with everyone watching?
Sure. Um, well, I agree. It's uh, not a sprint; it's a marathon. Um, you have neuroplasticity on your side. What the therapists would tell you 6 months are wrong, as we all know. Yeah, I'm almost 15 years out, and if I got another month, a little less than a month to 15. If I set my mind to something, I can learn how to do it. I know how to do most everything I do in life, so I basically do a maintenance level of work. But I would totally agree that it's a long haul, it's a marathon. It's early on in my recovery, I decided I'd probably be doing this for the rest of my life, and I was okay with that because I thought, well, you could be dead. Uh, so there's the other side to the whole thought of having to do maintenance or whatever, having it be a lifetime life. Well, it's like anything, like losing weight. You don't lose weight on a diet; you lose weight from a lifestyle change. This is a forced lifestyle change, but if you can have an attitude that's what it's going to take, that'll keep you from getting discouraged. And part of motivation is to kind of keep on track and not get discouraged or let things stand in your way. So remember, one other thing is the the turtle won the race. Slow and steady beats fast and erratic. And I've seen a lot of people going at it fast and erratic. They start out with something that's not maintainable. So that would be a tip for me. Figure out where you're at this point. A lot of this comes back always to paying attention to what's going on with you. So you can, it's important to figure out where you're at and take on something that's achievable from that point. Not something that and not some kind of crazy schedule you can't maintain, says a guy who did 10 hours a day. but not everybody can do that. I knew I could, so I kind of set that as my goal. I tell other people, and I did this myself, while I went at it like a maniac, I also gave myself, everybody's heard me say this a number of times, small achievable goals, because when you achieve your goals, that's motivating. And, when you don't feel like it the next morning, you can remember that you did one more or whatever yesterday, and you can use that to motivate yourself. One other thing I did a lot of was I kept track. Some people have do logs, or they measure or time things, like pegboards or walking or whatever. I'm not a big believer in training for speed and walking. I think it's fine in terms of pegboard or whatever. I'm fairly self-aware, so I just kept track of where I was at any given point, and I knew if I was doing better or worse. So, but if you need to do what works for you, keep a log, time your pegboards. So whatever you can do, like you said, William, to know that you're making some level of improvement. You mentioned videos. I think that's another way. Not everybody has someone else to take videos of them walking. It's kind of hard to take a video of yourself walking, although some people do it by setting up the camera and starting it and knowing that they're walking in the right place. But any number of things that keep you accountable to yourself. That was one of the things that I did to stay motivated. I agreed with myself to a certain accountability to myself and to my recovery. So I know you have a couple more things, William, so why don't I toss it back to you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I just wanted to highlight what you mentioned about keeping track, because I also think that this is really important when it comes to recovery after stroke, especially with regards to obviously staying motivated in your own recovery. I think every stroke survivor wants to know, as they're going through recovery, that they are making improvements, and changes are actually possible, and that it is going to get better, contrary to what physical therapists have said, which, based on what I've been told from survivors I've helped, there have been times where they've been told that this is as good as it's going to get, and the recovery is not going to get any better, no matter how hard they try. So on that note, I just wanted to say, I think when it comes to motivation and staying motivated, keeping track is really important. My version of that, and Ralph, I know you mentioned logbooks and timers and all that. My version of that is making sure that you actually get a visual of how much you are actually improving. So, for example, in my own recovery, every time I tried out a new exercise, I wanted to know whether or not it worked. In other words, I took on the approach as if I was a baseball player, and I kept swinging the bat. When am I going to hit the ball, and when am I going to find the winning formula, and when am I going to find that success? So whenever I did do a new exercise, what I would do is I would be very interested in how my brain responded to that exercise in terms of neuroplasticity. Would my brain improve, and would my brain learn something new from that experience of doing that exercise? I wasn't sure. But what I would do is I would check the next day to see if I could maybe move my arm a little bit stronger, or maybe was I walking with a better gait. And then after I would check the next day, I might not notice anything, because maybe it's too soon to tell. But I would definitely circle back with myself in maybe a week or a month, and I would and what I would do is I would not only would I observe it in myself to see if I was moving it better, but I would also ask other people around me who maybe haven't seen me in a while, and ask them, hey, do you think I'm walking better compared to the last time you saw me? Or do you think I'm lifting up my arm a lot smoother compared to a week ago? Quite often the people I would ask would be my physical therapist, because they would only see me once a week. And as a stroke survivor myself, living this day by day, I know that it's going to be more difficult to notice improvements on a day-to-day basis. And having said that, I think a lot of stroke survivors, and this is based on the many stroke survivors I've spoken to since my stroke recovery, they don't give themselves enough credit for the improvements they made, because they're expecting something to happen on a day-to-day basis. But the thing with recovery after stroke is that quite often you can't see the changes on a day-to-day basis, but rather you're only able to see the changes and the improvements once you take a 40,000-foot view and you have a look back at your recovery after maybe 3 months of doing a new exercise, or maybe 6 months of doing a new exercise. And it's only then can you see that you've actually made a lot of improvements in terms of your recovery. And I mean, if we were to demonstrate this as a graph, a lot of stroke survivors, after they leave hospital, or after they run out of therapy, their recovery tends to go like this. It tends a flat line. But if you're doing a new exercise in recovery after stroke, what you should notice is that you should notice a short-term spike. And then after around the 3 months or 2 months, you might notice that your movement is significantly a lot better than before when you started the exercise. And then it might taper off a little bit. And then you might need to find another exercise to do to get that spike again, to, I guess, allow your brain to learn how to become a lot better at that movement or that skill you're trying to perfect. And having said that, I also think, and I'm not sure if I mentioned this already, but I'm trying to be as thorough as possible, so I'm probably repeating myself. I also think it's really important to, and this is more of a thing for survivors who want to go the extra mile. It's something I did when I was in hospital, because I thought it might be helpful as I was trying to learn how to relearn to walk. But I think, taking videos and recording yourself performing certain movements or performing certain tasks around the house, for example, picking up objects, that actually is a really powerful tool for letting yourself know how you're progressing in your recovery. For example, some of the survivors I help, one of them, when they first met me, their thumb was completely glued into their hand like that. And then it was only a week later, after I showed them some exercises, that we noticed that their thumb, rather than being like this in a default position, it was out more like that. And the space between the thumb and the index was a lot larger compared to before. And the hand wasn't clenched in like that, but rather it was more open, with the thumb in a more open position, so that they were able to actually use it to actually pick up objects at the same time. And that's something you wouldn't be able to notice on a day-to-day basis, but rather it's something you can only notice maybe week to week. And it's even more encouraging when you take video of yourself where you were 2 weeks ago, before you started a new exercise, versus after you actually started that exercise, to see the effects and the improvements that you got from that exercise as well. So those are basically the other points I had to add to staying motivated. So making sure that you obviously check your work, because it can be hard to notice changes from a day-to-day basis. I would recommend that you check in with your physical therapist. They only see you once a week, so they would be able to notice changes a lot more compared to yourself. Whereas you might give yourself a little less credit than you deserve, because maybe you're expecting an instant fix or an instant turnaround. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen. And also the bonus, making sure that you take video of your own recovery. Maybe you might record yourself walking down a 10-yard stretch a week before you start therapy, and then 6 or 7 weeks into therapy, you record yourself walking down a 10-yard stretch again. And rather than watching it yourself, you would show your physical therapist, you would ask them any questions about whether or not they think you're walking a lot better. And if they are saying you're walking a lot better, you can ask them, why is it that you're walking a lot better, and what exercises they gave you helped you get that result. When you ask these questions, then you know what the winning formula is. And like I said earlier, it's like you're a baseball player and you keep swinging, hoping to hit that ball. Well, once you hit that ball, then you essentially now know that you have a formula for recovery and how your brain responds, how your brain responds to certain exercises, which will allow you to see more improvements in your recovery to come. So that's basically everything I want to add. And I've been talking for a while now. So I'll just pass back to you, Ralph. And I'm curious, did you have anything to share based off everything I just shared just then? I'm pretty sure you might have.
Oh yeah, whenever we talk, you say things that make me think about things that weren't on my list. One is the you mentioned, you didn't use the word plateauing, but you said flatlining. That's basically plateauing. Interesting. I've had two therapists tell me that plateauing is a therapist who doesn't know what to do next. Well, that also translates to your recovery. If you're not in therapy anymore, if your insurance is run out, you're managing your own home program. It's not the therapist that you don't know what to do next. And the answer is mix it up. William, you know this, but you and I've done one on mixing it up. We also did one on not plateauing. So if you anybody out there wants to know more about this, there are 2 or 3 on this subject in the roadmap playlists already. So, mix it up. If you're not getting results, try new things. I'm a video guy, but I didn't think about video for forever and ever until I started helping folks. I didn't use it at all in my own recovery. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm pretty self-aware, so I had a pretty good idea of where I was at and if what I was doing was working or not. And that's not something that everybody can do. I understand that. So do what works for you again. I wrote down a couple of other things that are, slightly different, different than what we've been talking about. One of the things that motivated me was I kept some family pictures in my wheelchair. If I got discouraged or anything, I'd pull out a picture of my granddaughter. So you can think about your family, you can think about your hobbies, you can think about the things that you love to do, things that you might like to return to doing. And then you can tell yourself, well, gee, if I don't work on my recovery, it's going to be longer before I can do those things. More of a burden on my family. Until I get this hand work, and I can't do my favorite hobby because I need 1.5 hands at least, that kind of thing. So, and getting better and working on your recovery is a motivating thing to me. It makes your life easier, makes life easier for those that are around you, that are helping you. So to me, that was a motivating factor. None of us like to be a burden. So use that I don't want to be a burden thing to motivate yourself to get better so that your quality of life is better and you're less dependent on the people around you, which will make you feel like less of a burden. And the other one I had was, you're going to wake up one day and not want to do it. I had days where I just wasn't motivated. What did I do? I either skipped a day or I employed a little trick I knew from running. And it's okay to skip a day. You don't want to get into skipping lots of days. You don't want to make skipping or not being motivated a habit. You want to make staying motivated a habit. And you do that by trying to do it as consistently as you can. So it's okay to skip a day if you have to, but try and keep it to that. What was my little trick? It's something I learned. I guess I used it in my recovery. It's something I got from running. I didn't use it in running, but every time whenever I start running, the first quarter mile, my brain goes to me, "Why are you doing this? It's not natural to run. Why are we running? Stop this." But I find that if I just persevere, and after a quarter mile or however long, my brain just stops doing that. I get used to running. In running, you get into a rhythm. You get your breath going right, your feet going right. Everything feels good, and you can just keep going. Well, maybe you should try and do that with your recovery. So sometimes what I would do would be, I don't feel like it, but I'm just going to go over there and I'll just do some marching. Maybe that'll get me out of this. And so when I'd go over and do the marching, and then, in my routine, knee bends are next. So sometimes I'd talk myself out of it, but more times than not, I would just do the knee bends and then the heel raises and the kicks and the abduction and all the things that I do at the counter. So sometimes you can jumpstart yourself. So give it a try. If it doesn't work, uh, take a day off and see if you can't get back at it tomorrow. It's important to get back at it. So that's. I mean, we could talk about this forever, but that's pretty much the points that I had. Oh yeah, once you get to where you can do things, to where you're walking again and maybe you have some use of your hand, you can start engaging in functional therapy. You touched on this a little bit, William, opening the door with your affected hand, doing 20% of wax on, wax off on the counters, that kind of thing. But getting to do functional therapy is motivating in itself, because you can remember, well, I couldn't wash the dishes and now I can. So when you get to functional therapy, I found it was easier to stay motivated because I wasn't forcing myself to do exercises. I started shifting and I would wash the dishes and stuff, and that's part of a routine. I didn't look at it the same way as, I don't know, I guess we all have some resistance to like going over there and doing 100 push-ups or whatever. Something from even if it's from our list and not from somebody else's list of things that we want to do. So that was a bit long-winded, but those are my other thoughts on this for now. I'm sure motivation is going to come up. A lot of these points come up in almost anything that we talk about, just because motivation's key. So make it key to your recovery. Try and stay motivated. But William, I'll toss it back to you if you got anything else.
I mean, I think the last thing I want to mention is some of you who are watching this, well, some stroke survivors in general, they find that keeping to a routine is actually beneficial, because as humans, we're creatures of habit. So if you can create a system where every single day you're doing the exact same thing and you're able to stick to it for maybe 90 days, I mean, sure, the first few days it's going to be tough, but by the end of the 90 days, you're essentially you've essentially grown comfortable with doing the exact same thing every single day. And that can actually, in a sense, help you stay motivated, because what was once hard to maintain is now something you do every single day. And not only is it not hard, but it's also something which is guaranteed to get results, because you know from the very start that when you're doing the exact same thing, you're going to be expecting a certain result, which is obviously improvements in your recovery after stroke. So, for example, if you wanted to improve your walking, and if you want to maintain that, what you would do is you would walk every single day. And on top of that, you would come back home and then you would do your leg exercises or your leg strengthening exercises, where you would refine the way you walk. And then you would do the exact same thing again the next day. And you would keep going through that loop of checking your work, having a look at whether or not you're improving, whether or not it feels easier to walk the next week, and so on and so forth. And I think when you have this cycle of doing the exercise, applying the exercise to real life or real life therapy, having a look back at your work, getting that feedback from other people, asking them if you're doing a lot better, then you're essentially on track to achieving your best recovery possible, because now you know that you're on your way to your North Star, whatever that may be. It could be, you know, learning how to walk again, or it could be learning how to get back more functional use of your arm and hand again. You have everyone who is rallying behind you to help you achieve that. Not just yourself. You've also got a support network of people who are telling you that yes, it is possible, and you are improving day by day. You've just got to keep persisting and never give up. I mean, sure, you might skip the odd day or two, but if you just stay on track with your goals like a missile, then eventually you're going to get there. It's just a matter of time until it's actually going to happen. But staying motivated, it's not something which is very hard. I mean, just speaking for myself, it's not something which is very hard. I think that if you get into the habit of wanting to become a lot better and improve your recovery every single day, and you have a system or a routine, then what was once uncomfortable can become something which is extremely comfortable to do, and something you don't even have to think about doing because you're just so used to working on your recovery every single day, whether this be, obviously doing real life therapy as exercise itself, or just having a routine where you're walking every day and then you're refining it in the clinic or at home with your leg exercises, like I mentioned, or having some iteration of or variation of that. So that's the last thing I just want to add. I think that a routine can be really beneficial, and it's the big reason why a lot of your improvements are made when you're at the rehab hospital, because you are in a environment where you are being held accountable by your physical therapist, because they're checking up on you every single day, and they're telling you what you need to do to obviously get discharged from the hospital in a safe way and be able to live independently once you leave the hospital and you're living by yourself at home. So with that being said, I just want to pass it back to you, Ralph. Did you have anything else to add before we leave it there for this week?
No, just one thing. That's a good addition. Yeah, we didn't mention routine until you brought it up, and I very much used routine. Yeah, when you're in a rehab hospital, they set a routine for you. I mentioned accountability. You got to be able to set up accountability to yourself. One of the things I found, well, I like routine. I like knowing what I'm doing at any given time rather than figuring it out. I'm a bit of a plotter, so I'll just latch on to a routine and do it, which is what I did. I walked every day. I walked every other hour. So I would walk an hour, then I would do either hand or arm. Walk an hour, hand and arm, or shoulder. I probably did in the beginning a little bit more hand than shoulder because my shoulder wasn't working. As my hand got better, I did more and more shoulder because I finally got the shoulder going. But every other hour I walked. So I walked about 5 or 6 times a day because I did 10 to 12 hours. And I wasn't thinking about it. One thing I find is if I got too much time to think about it, my little brain can sometimes talk me out of it. So if I know I've got a routine, I'll just stick to it. And maybe you can make that work for you. I know it does for me, but then, like I said, I'm a plotter. I was also on the swim team, and then I'll tell you what, there's nothing more boring in the world than swimming a whole bunch, miles worth of laps, or a couple miles worth of laps back and forth in the pool. So that's all of it. Unless you got something else, I guess we'll end it here and see everybody soon on the next roadmap. And thank you for your time, William.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Ralph.